Welcome to Heartglow CEO, where high-performing leaders learn to regulate stress, strengthen self-trust, and make clear decisions without sacrificing their health or values. I'm Casey Rossi, Integrative Leadership Coach. Expect practical nervous system tools, conscious leadership insights, and real conversations that bring achievement into alignment. Take a deep breath with me, and let's dive in. There are weeks when insight does not come from another book, framework, or conversation about strategy. Sometimes it comes from paying attention. This week, nature gave me two very different teachers, a family of skunks in my backyard and a mother swan with her young. At first glance, this may sound like a sweet little nature story. But the more I sat with it, the more I realized there was something here about leadership, power, protection, perception, and the way we learn to trust what we know. For the first time, I have a little skunk family living near my home. They come out in the morning and again in the evening. They forage close to the earth, they move at their own pace, and mind their own business. They're not aggressive or dramatic. They're not looking for trouble. They're simply living. And yet most of us hear the word skunk and immediately think danger, smell, stay away. That's the connotation. But in reality, at least from what I've been witnessing, it's much more peaceful. They have a rhythm. They stay focused on what they're doing. They really don't seem interested in bothering anyone. And still they carry a boundary everyone understands. And that struck me. Because in leadership, especially for those of us who care deeply, it can be easy to confuse peace with passivity. We want to be kind, relational. We want people to feel safe with us. We want to lead in a way that feels human and not harsh. But kindness without clarity can quietly become over-availability. Let that sink in for a minute. Compassion without boundaries can become over-functioning. And I know I've been there. And being easy to work with can slowly turn into being too easy to override. I see this with several leaders that I support in the nonprofit sector. I know this pattern well, and many heart-centered leaders do. There's a difference between being peaceful and being boundaryless. And that little skunk family reminded me of that. They were not moving through the yard trying to prove anything. There was no performance or posturing, no unnecessary force. But there was still a very clear message in the air. Come close with respect. I think that's a beautiful leadership lesson. Can we be peaceful and still have a line? Can we be warm and still be clear? Can we stop over-explaining ourselves into exhaustion just to make the boundary feel more acceptable to someone else? Boundaries are not just personal development language. They shape the way you lead. They affect decisions, communication, culture, energy, and trust. A leader with no boundaries eventually becomes tired, resentful, overwhelmed, unclear. A leader who only knows how to protect through force, they may get compliance, but most times they will lose connection. And there is another way, a quieter way, a more grounded way. The skunk offers this interesting image of peaceful protection. It doesn't seek conflict, but it's also not without defense. It doesn't need to be feared to be respected. It simply lives in alignment with its design. And that made me wonder how many leaders are being invited into that kind of quiet confidence. Here's a radical honesty check. Are you living in alignment with your design? So a few days later, I saw something I had never seen before in person. A mother swan with her babies. It was so cool. They were moving through the water together, the little cygnets close by, and she was right there with them. There was this softness to the whole scene. The kind of moment that makes you pause before you even realize you're pausing. I really was in awe. Swans carry such a strong association with beauty and grace and this pristine purity. They seem to glide. They appear elegant and serene and almost untouched by the water around them. But that day, I actually saw another side. At one point, my bestie and I got a little too close trying to take a picture, not with harmful intent. We were simply just trying to capture this moment. And the mama just knew. She lifted up one of her huge wings and kind of just flung it out like a cape and placed it over her young, shielding them. It was breathtaking. And of course, we stepped back. What stayed with me was how simple and immediate it was. She did not create chaos or need to perform protection. She just protected. Her body knew what mattered. And that's the part that I keep returning to. Her body knew. So much of modern leadership is mental. Strategy, planning, data, meetings, metrics, decisions, communication, and all of that matters. But there's also a deeper kind of knowing that lives underneath the mental noise. And you probably have felt when something is too close, or if something's out of pace. You can feel when a conversation needs more truth. I can. You can feel when a team is just stretched way beyond what people are willing to say out loud. The question is whether we listen. That mother swan did not pull the room. She did not ask whether her instinct was valid. She did not wait until the moment became dramatic. She responded to what the moment required. And I think there's a leadership lesson in that too. Not impulsive reaction or defensiveness or control, but discernment. The kind that comes from being present enough to know what is yours to protect. And every leader is protecting something, whether they realize it or not. Sometimes it's the trust of a team. Sometimes it's the early stage of an idea that doesn't need everyone's opinion yet, or a culture that you've worked hard to build. It actually can also be your health, your energy, your integrity. So these pieces about your identity or the part of you that knows you can't keep leading from depletion. The swan reminded me that protection can be beautiful. It doesn't have to be sharp or strong. It does not have to be loud to be clear or abandon softness to have authority. And that's what I love about this image. The swan didn't stop being graceful when she needed to protect her young. Her grace and her strength were not separate. They belong to the same movement. And isn't that what so many leaders are trying to learn? Let's think about it for a minute. How many more leaders are trying to bring more of themselves into the room? How many leaders do you know that are not trying to split themselves in a million parts? Or said another way, how many integrated leaders do you see? The integration. So it's not like a warm part over here and a decisive part over there, but integration. How many people lean more into the spiritual part but leave the professional part behind? Or just really highlight the strong part and disconnect from the tender part? It's an interesting reflection, and real leadership asks for integration. It asks us to become whole enough that our care has a backbone. Think about that. That your clarity still has heart. That's why the skunk and the swan feel like such interesting companions. The skunk reminds us that peace still needs boundaries. The swan reminds us that love sometimes needs protection. Together, they challenge the idea that power has to be forceful to be effective. And at some point, the question becomes, where am I leading from true devotion? And where am I leading from depletion? Where am I being kind? And where am I avoiding the discomfort of being clear? And lastly, where am I protecting what matters? And where am I leaving something tender exposed because I don't want to seem difficult? These questions aren't small. They shape how you make decisions and the culture around you. They shape what people come to expect from us. They shape whether we can continue to lead with integrity over time. There's also something here about perception. I think there's so many connotations here. I love the fact that the universe brought me something black and white to look at and to really start to push the boundaries of what my perceptions are. The skunk has a reputation. Most of us don't see a skunk and think, how peaceful. We think, please don't spray me. The swan has a reputation too. Beauty, grace, elegance, serenity. But both are more complex than their reputation. The skunk isn't looking for trouble, and the swan is not merely decorative. And leaders are often more complex than perceptions others place on them. People see your kindness and assume she won't hold the line. Or sometimes they can see someone who's calm and assume, they don't have strong convictions. There's a complexity here. And in this, self-trust really comes up again, because without self-trust, we can start leading from other people's incomplete perception of us. I see this too with a lot of people who get very attached to assessment results. You are so much more than a number on a sliding scale, than your Enneagram number, than your energy leadership category. Yes, that data matters, and I'm not making light because I think that they can be incredible tools. But when I start to see them not being productive is when people just latch on and then start saying, I did this because of that. Whether it's a self-imposed diagnosis or, again, attaching to assessment results, we're so much more complex than that. There's a bigger picture here that has to do with common sense, self-trust, and that deeper intuitive wisdom. I guess that's a little sidetrack here to honor all pieces and parts of you, to learn from data, but also to not be limited by it. So back to my skunks and swan story. The skunks in my backyard are not trying to rebrand themselves. The swan on the water was not trying to explain her complexity. They were simply living according to what they knew. And that's the invitation that I'm taking and sharing with you, to spend less energy performing leadership and more energy embodying it. To stop constantly confusing availability with care or grace with passivity. To stop confusing being liked with being trusted. Oosh, that's a big one. Because the leaders we trust most are not always the ones who say yes to everything. They're the ones that know what matters, but more importantly, they're the ones that are willing to honor it, the ones who can stay connected to themselves under pressure. They are the ones who can be warm but not vague, clear but not harsh, protective but not controlling, open but not boundaryless. And this is where nature is such a powerful teacher. Just look outside. Nature's not lecturing. It's not talking at you. It's not trying to impress you. It simply reveals a family of skunks foraging in the morning light, a mother swan lifting her wing over her young. Small moments, easy to miss. But if we're paying attention, they can bring us back to something essential. Leadership is not always learned by pushing harder. Sometimes it's learned by noticing what's already true. So I'll leave you with this. Where in your leadership are you being invited to be more like the skunk, peaceful, focused, and clear about your boundary? And where are you being invited to be more like the swan, graceful, devoted, and willing to protect what is still becoming? If you like this episode, please leave a review at lovethepodcast.com/brilliance and share it with a friend. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you like how I bring in different templates and pieces and parts to illuminate what I hope are essential leadership nuggets of wisdom. Until next time, my friend, breathe joy.